Hi, welcome back as we start the exploration of the heart and everything related to it. So, we've already learned about blood, which is the circulating fluid, and then we learned about the blood vessels that transport the blood. So, today we're going to be learning about the heart, which is responsible for pumping the blood throughout your body. So the first thing to be aware of is that blood flow through the heart, just like through the blood vessels, is one direction only. When blood enters the chamber of the heart from one location, it cannot U-turn and go back out. It will have to continue and exit in, in a different location so that all the flow goes in one direction. Now, there are really two blood pathways that occur in the heart. Blood from your body that is partially deoxygenated and full of the waste will re-enter the right side of the heart. And when it exits the right side of the heart, it will then go to either the right or the left lungs to pick up oxygen. Now, that highly oxygenated blood that leaves the lungs is not going to re-enter the right side of the heart, because the only place that blood exits the right side of the heart is to go to the lungs. So when blood is oxygenated, it has to enter the heart on the left side of the heart. And then when blood exits the left side of the heart, it goes back out to distribute the oxygen to the rest of the body. So that gives us two distinct circulations. The pulmonary circulation is when blood leaves the right lower chamber of the heart and goes to the lungs, and then returns back to the left upper chamber of the heart. And in contrast, the systemic circulation would be when blood leaves the left lower chamber of the heart, goes to the entire body, and then returns to the right upper chamber of the heart. And so here's a pencil drawing of the heart showing where the partially deoxygenated blood travels in blue and the oxygenated blood travels in red. So once you know your heart parts, come back and practice your blood flow through the heart with the picture and then without the picture. So one of the main functions of the heart is to generate a pressure behind the blood when it exits the heart so it can travel to the entire systemic circulation. And the further away you are, the smaller vessels you are, the lower that pressure is going to be. So this is what a young adult's heart looks like. So everybody put your hand over your heart. And so a lot of you are doing this because this is what you learned in grade school, but this is not where your heart is. To find your heart, find your sternum and go to where the body and xiphoid process of your sternum is. That's where your heart is located. It is substernal. And then this heart is one that an older adult would have. As you can see, as you age, you get more adipose tissue on the surface of your heart. Now the heart has one of those three serous layers around side of it. To refresh your memory, if you put your fist into the balloon, what has a little bit of watery fluid in it, you're going to have one layer right next to the organ, a little bit of fluid, and then the layer on the other side. And the one relative to the heart is called the pericardium, meaning around the heart. So let's take a look at this last picture on the bottom right, and here's what it would look like around the heart. So this is the wall of the heart right here. This represents the heart muscle, and this represents the chamber in the heart. And so on the outer surface of the wall of the heart, you would have this inner layer of the pericardium known as the visceral pericardium. And adjacent, and you can see actually it coming up and turning around at the top and forming the outer layer of pericardium, the parietal pericardium. And in between those two layers is where you would have the small amount of pericardial fluid in the pericardial cavity. So the cavity itself is not containing the heart. The cavity is around the heart. The picture on the upper right is a third heart for you to see, one with plenty of adipose tissue again. And in this one, it's like the picture on the bottom left where you see the parietal pericardium around the heart and they have cut it. The same thing is going on the right. And this, where the arrows are pointing, these are the cut surfaces of the parietal pericardium. Now, I want to point out something else. If you look at the drawing where we have the visceral and parietal pericardium, you will see this third layer right here, which is attaching to this blood vessel up there. And this layer is the fibrous pericardium. And so it is external, or it's the external portion next to the parietal pericardium, and it attaches superiorly the pericardium to these great vessels, the arch of the aorta, the pulmonary trunk, and inferiorly, it will attach the pericardium to the diaphragm. And this holds the heart in its place. So if you lie on your side to go sleep, your heart doesn't flop over into one side of the chest or the other. It is held in position. So when we're looking at the heart wall, we have three distinct layers. The heart muscle itself is the myocardium. And on the inner surface, we will have the endocardium. And on the outer surface, we will have the epicardium. And now you're going to say, wait a minute, Dr. Powell, didn't we just say on the outer surface of the heart, we had parietal pericardium? And you would be correct. And that's because the parietal pericardium is the same thing as the epicardium. And which word you use depends on how the question is being asked. If you're being asked about serous membranes, you use the pericardium word. But if you're being asked about layers of the heart wall, you can use the term epicardium, which is just a lot faster to write. So on the right, I have some pictures and to remind you, with words to remind you about cardiac muscle being unipennant or bipennant, being striated, but there's no triads. There are gap junctions and desmosomes. If you don't remember what those specifically do, please look them up because they have big functions in heart muscle. And the heart muscle also does contraction as well. So to understand the anatomy of the heart, I like to start with heart in the box and realize your heart is divided on the right side and the left side. And each side then is divided into upper chambers and lower chambers. And the upper chamber, each one is an atrium, each lower chamber is a ventricle. Now this would be great if this is how it is, but it's actually rotated and turned slightly. But in drawings, it's easier to understand than it is looking at models and actual hearts themselves. So when we look at the heart chambers, you can clearly see the two light blue atria and then the two dark blue ventricles. And what you'll notice is blood enters an atrium on the right side from the body, and it has to go through a doorway to get to a ventricle, and these doorways we call valves. So there's going to be a valve between each atrium and ventricle. And then when blood exits the ventricle, it actually doesn't exit the bottom of the ventricle because of the way the heart contracts. It actually exits up the top, which is where the blood vessels are. So there are valves between the heart chamber and the blood vessels as well. So I also want to point out that there's muscle that separates the two ventricles, and this is called the interventricular septum. And although it's noticeable on this drawing to the left, when you look at the drawing to the right, it becomes super noticeable, but that the thickness on the two ventricles is totally different. And that the right ventricle, which only pumps to the nearby lungs, is actually pretty thin, but the left ventricle is going to be about 3 times thicker because it has to generate enough pressure to pump that blood to your entire body. Now, in addition to an interventricular septum, we also have an interatrial septum, but it's hidden behind these great blood vessels in the drawing. So the cardiac muscle is not arranged like skeletal muscle where it all just goes in one direction. Around the chambers of the atria, it actually goes in circles from the outside. So when it contracts, it squeezes it this way and the blood will go down into the ventricles. And in the ventricles, it kind of has this swirly pattern, as you can see, kind of a figure 8 pattern. And on the right, I have this picture so that you can realize all 4 of the valves are actually at the same level of the heart. So we have the 2 valves between the atria and the ventricles, and then we have the 2 valves for going into the anterior blood vessels. So this picture on the right is done from the anterior view, and the picture from the left is actually done from a posterior view. Sorry, I said that wrong. The picture on the left is an anterior view, and the picture on the right is a posterior. And the reason why I like that picture on the right is it helps me explain to you something known as the fibrous skeleton of the heart, which is found at that level that contains the 4 valves. And this fibrous skeleton is dense connective tissue. It's not muscle, and it does 3 very important functions. The first thing, and although you can see it on the picture on the left, which is a photograph of a preserved heart, on the right in the drawing, it's probably easier to see. The fibrous skeleton is this dark blue substance. And as you can see, it anchors each one of the valves. So when the valves contract, they're not pulling and distorting heart muscle and vice versa. The other thing it does is it electrically insulates the ventricles from the atria. So when the impulse is traveling along the atria and it hits this fibrous skeleton, there's no muscle there for it to continue through. The impulse has a momentary pause there. And the third thing it does is to this fibrous skeleton that the muscles themselves are attached. They are not directly attached to the valve. So speaking of valves, we have 4 valves, 2 which are going into the blood vessels exiting the ventricles, and they have a structure which is very similar to the structure of the valves that we saw in our larger veins. And then we have 2 differently shaped valves which are between the atria and the ventricles. Now, if you took an anatomy course in high school, you may have been able to learn them as the right and left atrioventricular valves, but they have actual names. The one on the right, as demonstrated here in the right lower quadrant, this is called the tricuspid valve because it has like 3 of these flaps coming down. And the one on the right side of the heart has 2, and some people call it the bicuspid valve, but the name we are going to use and the name that all clinicians use in all the fields of study is the mitral valve. Because we talk about diseases of the mitral valve, such as mitral valve prolapse. We don't call it bicuspid valve prolapse. So just learn tricuspid valve on the right and mitral valve on the left. Now, only on the tricuspid and mitral valve are there a couple of other associated valve structures. So the valve is this solid white part only. And these stringy parts which are attached to the inferior surface of the valve, which then attach to heart muscle, they are known as the chordae tendineae. And the muscles that they are attached to are special pieces of muscle which actually go into the chamber of the heart in the middle. They are not the outer wall muscle. And as you can see in the drawing on the right where it is backlit, well, it's a photomicrograph, it's not a drawing, sorry. And this muscle is known as papillary muscle. So depending on which chamber, you either have 2 or 3 papillary muscles. So if you've ever heard the saying, you're pulling on my heartstrings, basically they were referring to the chordae tendineae of the heart. So how do these valves work? Well, the valves going to the blood vessels, known as the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve, When the ventricle contracts, that force pushes this valve open and blood will exit into the blood vessel going in an upward direction. Then when the chamber down below relaxes, there's no oomph behind it, and the blood comes down and it catches the valve leaflets and closes the valve until the next time the ventricles contract. In contrast to that, the tricuspid and the mitral valve, these are the ones that have the chordae tendineae attached to the papillary muscles. And students often think that, oh, so the muscle contracts and it pulls open the valve for blood to enter the ventricles. And I'm going, nope, that's not how it works at all. It has nothing to do with blood entering the ventricles from the atrium. What happens is when the ventricles contract and the pressure pushes these two valves close, the pressure is high enough that it could flip the valve upside down if it did not have these chordae tendineae to hold it in place. So they shortened the amount of movement of the tricuspid and mitral valve. So when they are at work, we've got this papillary muscle ingrained down here, the chordae tendineae and the valve up there, and everything is copacetic. And when they don't work, then the valve flips upside down. So hopefully these visuals will help you. So at this point, pause for a second and determine what valves you think these are, what structures you see, and how this valve functions. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about, because I always get asked about, are heart murmurs. Okay, so heart murmurs are caused by turbulent flow. You can hear the blood flow. Normally, all you hear are valves snapping shut. And so the turbulent flow or the abnormal blood flow in the heart is caused by one of two general scenarios. The first is called a stenosis, where the valve does not open all the way, it's only open partially. And so here's an example of that when the valve opens all the way, blood flows right through and it's nice and quiet. But when the blood is constricted and has to go through a much smaller opening, that leads to turbulent flow because flow isn't going one direction, it's having to change direction to get through the valves, and it continues in that pathway on the other side. Then you have all this turbulence, kind of like when you see turbulence in a river or a stream once water has gone past a narrowing with rocks or with a dam. And so here's an example of a valve that has stenosis, and you can see in this valve how narrow that opening should be, because here's the entire blood vessel and the valve should be opening all the way out, but in fact the leaflets of the valve are fused to each other so they cannot separate to open. Now the other way you get a murmur is when a valve is leaky. So normally when a ventricle contracts, for instance, and it closes the valve, there's then the blood is going to go out a different opening. But if the valve is leaky, for instance, if there's a problem with the chordae tendineae in either the mitral or the tricuspid valve, then blood actually can go back up into the atrium, and you can hear the noise of the blood swishing back through that valve when it should no longer be swishing. And so here's an example in the lower right quadrant, lower right corner, where you can see that the chordae tendineae are markedly thickened and shortened so they cannot perform their jobs adequately. And that's it for this section. So I want to thank you for learning about your heart today, and we will continue shortly.